Today we are joined by Sarah from Shepshed Carers Cooperative and John from Northwest Care Cooperative. They are here to discuss their experiences with organising cooperative social care alternatives. For attendees who are carers or those who have been cared for, these talks will provide insight into what it is like to be part of a care cooperative. We will learn about the benefits and the challenges of democratic and grassroots control of ownership and management as a strategy for transforming care relationships. We've seen how the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated and exposed pre-existing inequalities within the social care sector. The financialization of care has allowed private equity firms to dominate the market, transforming care work into an exploitative, profit-making enterprise. In the UK, we spend £10.5 billion a year on care. People with significant care and support needs are forced to pay huge sums, while staff are increasingly underpaid and overworked. The pandemic has squeezed our care workers further, with nearly half of paid social care receivers seeing a reduction in support. This structural inability to meet rising care needs has led to increasing cases of neglect and countless unnecessary deaths. The crisis in paid social care is deeply rooted, with people falling through the cracks of our current system every day. Yet the undervaluation of care extends beyond the paid sector and throughout all our social relationships. We were aware, whilst preparing this event, that care is a vast concept. We all have different relationships to care, with the majority of care work being unpaid. The labour that goes into caring often falls on the shoulders of marginalised folk. We can see how mutual aid and cooperation can foster greater fairness and equality in the caring relationship. In the UK, there is a growing movement of people adopting the cooperative model, with the aim of taking care into their own hands. Our speakers will outline how, in their experiences, democratic organising can provide higher quality care, as members have full autonomy over decision-making, pay structure, and methods of care provision. We'll learn about the differences and challenges in navigating both workers and multi-stakeholder ownership models. In the second half of the event, we will have time to discuss what setting up a care cooperative in Brighton could look like. Just before I hand over to our first speaker, can I check, does anyone have any questions or technical points before we move on with the event?
So good evening, everybody. My name's John Roberts, and I am the registered manager, company secretary, chief cook and bottle washer for Northwest Care Cooperative. And we are a cooperative-based care organisation, obviously based in the Northwest, with two cooperatives currently functioning, one in around Chester and one on the Wirral. We describe ourselves as providing safe, quality care under your control and informed by your experience. But I think we've kind of learned during our time that we don't really like to talk much about care. That seems to be, I think, really to us, a kind of deficit sort of word. And we tend to talk about providing support to enable people to live life well, which we do with people rather than to people, hence our kind of strapline that together we can live life well. So tonight, Matthew's asked me to talk really about three things: why cooperatives are so important currently, how they differ to other provision, and how specifically we as Northwest Care Cooperative function as a cooperative. So to the first of those, why cooperatives are so important, and I would say that there's probably four reasons. I think the first is that along for the person receiving that service, and can actually be done at a cost which enables us to pay the employee member above market rates, and yet still to the commissioner be kind of an attractive product at an attractive cost to commission. So we can compete with other providers in terms of price, which I think is also going to be quite significant. How they differ to other provision, again, really around four key things for me. The leadership of the cooperative is obviously distributed by nature of it being a cooperative. And we kind of talk about it being a circle rather than a continuum. And I'll perhaps come on to that in a little bit. So the leadership's distributed. So one member, one vote. It means that employees, people receiving the service, and also those who are actually responsible for kind of some of the regulatory and structural functions of the service, all have a kind of equality or an equal say in the way that things operate, and have an equal responsibility in terms of leadership. So that distribution of leadership is really, really critical. And specifically during COVID-19, it showed how resilient such an organisation was when the landscape and the environment around it changed. And a lot of organisations that kind of struggled actually on an more old-fashioned sort of hierarchical leadership model, it was easy for us to operate because our leadership was distributed. We describe our model and our decision-making and our kind of leadership function as a circle rather than a continuum. And the idea there really is that in a traditional service delivery environment, it is on a continuum in which at one end of the continuum is the person receiving the service. And in care terms, the next step along that continuum will be the care worker. Then the next step, the care worker's supervisor. Then the next step, the care worker's supervisor's manager, and then director. And until eventually you get chief executive and the board of the organisation, the company, whatever that's delivering the care. And of course, the challenge there, as it is with all organisations that are structured that way, is that if there is something that is not working for the user, then and it's a big thing, and it's about the direction or the tone or the style of the whole service, and it's something that the board has to make a decision about, then there's a whole range of kind of gatekeepers between the user and that decision-making point along that continuum. But of course, in a cooperative model, your service users or the people receiving the service are also the people who effectively sit on what you might describe as the board of the cooperative. That kind of one member, one vote principle means that they are also the decision makers. So that continuum becomes a circle. And what better way to provide safe, caring, effective, responsive, and well-led care than that circle. And certainly those particular lines of inquiry, safe, caring, responsive, effective, and well-led, are the lines of inquiry for the Care Quality Commission. And certainly when we went for our registration now a couple of years ago, they were quite taken by the way that that circle delivers on those lines of inquiry in a way that the continuum doesn't. We also describe ourselves as a community of care. So because our relationships, because the working relationships are different, because there's that one member, one vote sort of principle, a degree of kind of equity between our different elements of our membership, then we feel that we create a community, and we aim and try and create a community whose members care about each other, rather than a service delivery environment in which employees employed by the service provider care for the service users in the kind of, the language of service provision. So we create a community where the different elements care about each other. And specifically, that relates to the way that our personal assistants or our employee members can be supported in delivering their support. And so an example of that would be we have a number of part-time employee members who may work around their personal lifestyle commitments, childcare, and so on and so forth. And it's easy to match those with the requirements of the user member, because the user member cares for the employee member and to support them in the same way that the employee member is trying to support them. So there's a kind of mutuality there that creates that community of care. And we would argue that if as the African proverb says, it takes a village to teach a child, then it takes a community to enable people to live their life well. And that kind of community and the very social nature of the way we operate is fundamental to cooperative thinking and working. And then finally, the way that we're different is that employee members are empowered and respected. And so critically, we pay above national living wage rates for all our PAs. Our sort of pay rates in Cheshire and Wirral are very competitive and generally above what's available locally. Conditions and entitlements are good for PAs. And I think a very good example of that is that when we first started back in July 2019, our first month of trading, the three initial members, first members of our cooperative, sort of user members, as it were, one of them pulled out after the first month because they said we were too expensive. Now, we can't have been too expensive because we were charging the individual who was on a direct payment at that time less than the council was paying them to manage that direct payment themselves. But of course, what they were doing is the direct payment from the council was to provide for the hourly rate for the carer. It was also to put a proportion aside to pay a pension contribution if that was necessary for that carer, to pay for that carer's leave, the 5.6 weeks that they're entitled to under employment law. And of course, none of that was happening. And in fact, the money was being used elsewhere in the care package, which made us look expensive. So at the expense of the workers or the employees' rights, if you like, the care was being provided. Well, in our structure, of course, the employees are given the rights in the way that they work from day to day that they are entitled to. So how we function as a cooperative, and again, I think Matt asked perhaps if I explained it in terms of sort of the nuts and bolts, and also then how we, the process of empowering people. So in terms of the nuts and bolts, the way that North West Care Cooperatives operates is that we have two unincorporated cooperatives. They operate according to a constitution that's been, we've taken from Cooperatives UK. They have 4 general meetings a year and one member, one vote, and direct their own, the style and tone of their own care. But those cooperatives are supported by this thing called North West Care Cooperative, which acts as a service company to support those cooperatives. And that service company is incorporated at Companies House as a not-for-profit organisation. It is registered by the Care Quality Commission. And we have to be an incorporated company to be registered by the Care Quality Commission, and it employs the personal assistants. So that service company carries all the regulatory and other kind of liability for the cooperatives that run. But those cooperatives direct the tone and the style of the care that they receive from their employee members and from the support that they get from North West Care Cooperative. And they do that through the traditional kind of cooperative means of one member, one vote, 4 general meetings a year, a number of informal sort of sessions throughout the year where they can set the tone and style as well outside those general meetings. The critical thing really about that structure is that it changes a whole load of the relationships. The relationship between employee and user is different. And I'll talk a little bit more about that again. But the relationship between the service company and the cooperatives is quite important to understand. And I always kind of describe it, having worked in the criminal justice system in the past, as a little bit like the relationship between the magistrate and the clerk of the court in the magistrate's court. So the cooperatives and the cooperative members act like the magistrates. They may be lay people. They may not be particularly have a deal of legal training, but they make the big decisions on the things that matter: innocence, guilt, and the sort of level of punishment, if you like. Whereas there is a clerk of the court, which acts like the service company, who knows the law, understands all that, and makes sure and advises the magistrates to make sure that the rules of evidence have been followed, that the sentencing is within guidelines and within limits and so on. And as long as the magistrates are making decisions that are kind of within the legal parameters, then actually they're free to make whatever decision they like. And that's the way the relationship with the service company works. So my role really is very much to ensure that the cooperatives, who can choose to run their sort of care or their support however they like, but I just make sure that it can be within the bounds of what the regulator requires, or within the bounds of what employment law requires, and all those other kind of liabilities. So in terms of the process of empowering people, then again, 3 or 4 key steps. The first thing really is that we match personal assistants or employee members with our clients or user members. And that is absolutely critical. So you get somebody who you are going to receive support from and build a fairly, what we hope will be a long-standing relationship with, rather than in the traditional domiciliary care agency where you get whoever's on the rota today, or maybe somebody else. So that PA client relationship, or user member and employee member relationship, is the bedrock of what we do. And it's key to understand that all the service that we provide, all the support, all the kind of service company stuff that we provide is built around that, and is to enable the quality of that relationship. So we start with that relationship and then build out from there. We have 3 categories of membership within the cooperative: user members and employee members, which is probably fairly obvious. But we also have a 3rd category of supporting member that can be anything that we need it to be. But quite often it's somebody who might be able to advocate on behalf of the user member, particularly if the user member has a learning difficulty, as many of our members do. So you've got somebody else there who can advocate on behalf of the person receiving the service. And very often it is those supporting members who actually hold the direct payment, which is, or the direct payment account, if you like, which pays for our services. So again, you know, if they feel they're unhappy with something, there's a little bit of leverage that they have, because they're the ones who are actually paying for it. So when it comes to bill time, they can argue the case. And not that that's ever happened, to be fair, but it just gives them that sort of element of control, really. We work according to kind of fairly standard cooperative principles, and as I say, a constitution produced by Cooperatives UK. So it's 1 member, 1 vote at 4 general meetings a year, where we make our big decisions and make sure that they are kind of recorded and audited for kind of governance purposes. But we also do a lot of work, a lot of discussion. We have a WhatsApp group for the cooperative that functions throughout, sort of 24/7 really. And that was a requirement of the Care Quality Commission, who asked us to provide a record of daily care. So it was something that would demonstrate that a personal assistant or employee member was turning up at the times and sort of dates specified or required within their care plan. Exactly the same as in a care home, where somebody would go into somebody's room and they'd probably put a note in a book or a log next to the kind of client's bed. So we do that on WhatsApp. We do that with photographs. It's all informed, a lot of connection and discussion and
I just want to set the scene a little bit. I want you to just picture 2 middle-aged women going about daily business. Neither of us were very academic. I left school at 15 with just a swimming certificate and a typing speed test. and Pauline, the other person that helped set it up, left with a swimming certificate. In '93, we were both made redundant from our respective jobs. Pauline actually worked in a residential home that was closed down for refurbishment. And the trouble is, when it reopened, they wouldn't re-employ her because she was deemed too old, and she was 52 at the time. Me, I worked in an office which went into receivership, but I couldn't get another job because I'd got no qualifications, so everybody deemed me too sick because they didn't look at what experiences I had. We were both in the St John ambulance at the time, and it was a district nurse who happened to be a nursing officer, felt that there was a need for people in the community. So we actually spoke to various people. We were invited to go on a training course, and the idea was that 2 care cooperatives were set up, one in the city and one in the county, which were initially funded by the city and county councils. The care workers would all be self-employed, and they would pay a levy to the cooperative, which should, in theory, after 2 years, 2-year period, pay the coordinator's salary. We duly went on to the course. We met up with a lady called Dorothy Francis, who actually worked for the CDA, that was the Cooperative Development Agency. It's now CASE, I understand, and it used to be called CASER at one point down the line. We both loved the idea of cooperative working, but Pauline was adamant that she didn't want to be part of that group. She wanted to set up her own business. So with the help of Dorothy from the co-op, and a £1,000 grant, Shepshed Carers was born on the 11th of February 1994. And our mission was, and still is, to provide quality care services to the local community. This provision helps maintain mental and physical well-being by enabling people to remain as independent as possible in their own homes. We used Pauline's dining room for an office at first, and we got to get work. We actually touted all the oldie clubs, like stroke clubs, WI and things like that. We explained what we were doing, and we actually got quite a bit of work from that. And by the end of the year, we had 16 carers and 23 clients. And we had started to do some rehabilitation work for the NHS. We actually won a first tender in 1995 from the county council, and were put on their approval list. We've had a spot contract with them ever since. However, in 2016, we thought that we'd lost the contract as we couldn't meet the criteria. The councils wanted larger companies to do the work for less money. However, this failed, and therefore we were able to keep the contract. By then, we had lost a lot of workers, and we found it really tough at that time. And we wasn't sure if we were going to survive, but hey, we're still here. After gaining our first contract, Pauline kept getting telephone calls from a really grumpy old man, or taxman he was. He told us that we're no longer self-employed, and he wanted us to start paying, to be a proper employee. So he asked for a meeting. We duly met at the CDA offices. Well, we've all done it, haven't we? And we all tried to match a face with a voice. Grumpy old man, we thought, well, how wrong could we be? He was the taxman's ultimate weapon. He had eyes for die for. And we were so mesmerised by everything he suggested, we just said yes. So therefore, we ended up being employers instead of self-employed. In '96, Pauline's dining room came too small, and therefore we moved to Field Street, or Field House. And that's where we're here today, and I'm sitting in one of the offices now at the moment. On the actual day of the move, Pauline's husband died after a long illness, which actually put a damper on the thing a bit. My mother was also in hospital at the time and died the following March. Because of this, both Pauline and I took the eye off the ball. And in January '97, we were actually suspended from our contracts for 3 months, as some of our carers became too involved with their service users, doing things that it should not have been doing. We were told that we were not following the health and social care protocol. So we gave ourselves a good talking to and developed more stringent policies and procedures. Every couple of years, we're inspected by CQC. A lot of people are not keen on them because that come in, but I actually embrace it as they tell us where we can improve our services. I do try to preempt what is expected of us and update policies and procedures and look out for any new ones, such as the Care Act when it came into force. And I'm pleased to say that the last one being in 2019 was quite positive. 1998, our first carer's baby was born, and in 2020, that very same baby came to work for us as a carer, and Mum also still works for us. When we had been going for 10 years, we were nominated and became runners-up in the Rural Business Women for the year. And the following year, we became winner of the Upstart Award for Social Enterprise. Pauline and I was also invited to Downing Street to meet the President, along with other entrepreneurs within that same year. Our other claim to fame is when Stephen Timms, Minister for Social Enterprise, came to visit our offices and spent most of the afternoon with us. As soon as he left, though, our receptionist informed me that I needed to go home as my daughter-in-law had gone into labour and could have taken to hospital. She got there in time, and the grandson is now a strapping 6-footer. As you can imagine, there have been a lot of changes over the years, such as becoming VAT registered when we hit the threshold, but then several years later being exempt because of the nature of the work. We had to deal with paying 3 weeks holidays, which were introduced in 1998 for all employees, and then another week the following year, and then a few years later, 8 more days was added on to that. We had introduction to computers, because when we first started, we used old-fashioned typewriters. We actually took advantage of government training and instructors came to the offices from a local college to show us how to use them correctly. It actually took Pauline a week to work out how to switch her first ever computer on. We went from fax machines to emails. That was very stressful at the beginning. ID cards have been introduced, holding copies of workers' driving licence, MOTs, insurance for business use was introduced as DBS certificates. We introduced a monitoring system to monitor the carers working. So they were actually having, instead of paper timesheets, we used electronic monitoring. That was actually a nightmare because nobody likes change. Training is really important to the business, as over the years the care side has got a lot harder as we experience to take on more and more, especially as the needs of the people change. So we've developed robust training schedules such as the care certificate for potential new workers and a rolling programme for mandatory training updates. We have a dedicated training room with all necessary equipment which is used on a regular basis, and we encourage all workers to complete the health and social care qualifications. Before I talk about Shepshed Carers structure, I want you to think about some of the companies that you have worked for and what are not cooperatives. These businesses are structured like a pyramid, with a few people at the top having most of the control and the majority people at the bottom having least say, and of course all the profits go to the least, to the ones at the top, the shareholders. Cooperatives share common elements with conventional businesses, but are structured in a different way. Everyone who works in the co-op has some say in the running of the business. All workers are also shareholders and therefore can directly benefit from the results of their labours. A cooperative is structured on a circular basis rather than the triangle. Pauline and I set the business up as a not-for-profit working cooperative, and everyone who works for the company after a probationary period of 6 months is invited to become a member. They have a voice on how the company should be run. We have a vote of confidence for the directors, coordinators and team leaders on an annual basis. So we have to make sure that they are doing their job to the best aspects of the business. And if you don't know, ask. You will need to work hard for little profit to start with. Don't rely on grants. I've seen so many companies start up and then finish because they are not sustainable once the grants are finished. Shepshed Carers is in its 27th year of trading, and I still can't see myself as a businesswoman, and up to last March a managing director at that, but I suppose I must have been because the company's house said so. The business has been restructured several times over the years, some due to retirement and some for other reasons, but sometimes this needs to happen if you want a company to survive. What was good 10 years ago may not work now. We've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but we have learned from them. Each time we have tendered for a contract, it's been harder. We've had to deal with new challenging legislation and regulations, deal with tighter budgets, rising petrol costs, inclement weather to deliver these services. We're always struggling to recruit as the profile of the work that we do is not very good. People see it as tea, toast and sympathy or wiping bottoms, but it's so much more. A few years ago, I heard a member of staff say that they were just a carer. I felt so sad about this, so we decided to raise the profile, and therefore we do not have carers working for us now, but we have care professionals. So has it been worth it? Well, over 27 years of trading, we have provided employment for over 600 people. We have given quality service for around 3,250 clients, which is numerous millions of hours. Several years ago, we reached the 1 million turnover mark, which perhaps not a lot for a big corporate business, but for me, personal triumph. When one of our service users rings up and tells us what a good job that their care professionals are doing, or a family tells us what a difference we've made to their loved ones, when a care professional says that they have, such job satisfaction and wish they'd done it years ago, this makes me pleased that Pauline and I was made redundant all those years ago. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That was so good. Really great to hear from you.
Not very technical though.
It's fine. We made it work. And what you said about like starting from the bottom up, to set up an organisation feels really important.
Very important.
Yeah, thanks so much.